As a real estate agent, we love to work with sellers. The reason is that we simply get more opportunity to find more business. And let's be honest, for the past decades, property were not really hard to sell, especially when demand for property was so high and interest was so low. After the pandemic and the countless money printing, inflation is through the roof. We are now in the dangerous territory with high interest, where most people are struggling with the added pressure from mortgage expense to daily high inflated prices. If you are not aware that we are in the balanced market for most part of the GTA, sellers' expectations were kind of hard to adjust, especially when we were mostly spoiled by many bull runs. Well, this is going to be a hard to swallow type of video. If you are a seller in today's Toronto market, let's grab a coffee and have a little sip and let's get to it. As a seller, when you first want to sell your property, you must have some kind of price in mind because for whatever reason you wanted to sell in the first place. Well, I shouldn't be saying that for all, but for those that have a need or want for some amount, more often than not, when they speak to a realtor, they want them to agree on a price they want. And for some realtors at first, whether they have been in the market for some time or not, they tended to lean towards agreeing with the client and of course wanted to put pen to paper on the contract. Really, there are three outcomes coming from this approach. The first outcome would be ideal for the seller and the realtor when the property is sold according to the seller's expectation. And this usually happened during the seller's market or for the past decades when all property was selling like hotcakes. Right, so this will be a happy client and obviously the realtor will be happy as well. But in today's situation, really, there are the following two outcomes that are most likely going to happen. If the realtor chooses to listen to the seller and list according to what the seller wants and completely ignore what the current market looks like, this is an outcome you don't want to see at the end. Let me tell you why. In today's market, if a trusty realtor would tell you the property has been sitting on the market for much longer, the majority end up being terminated or suspended due to prices not meeting the seller's expectations. It is also true when some realtors tell you that there are still properties selling fast, but those properties are usually some spectacular unit and there must be a wow factor with them, such as corner lots, some unconventional penthouses, condo units, incredible views, etc. You have to be honest with yourself. What is the wow factor you have in the unit that you are selling? Otherwise, with today's higher inventories popping out, especially during the fall, buyers simply have plenty of choices. Sellers often face a critical decision when pricing their property. When they list a property above a certain price threshold, they risk missing out on a substantial pool of potential buyers who specifically search within a lower price range. For instance, if a seller chooses to list their property at 1.1 million, while many recent sales in the area have been under 1 million, they may inadvertently exclude buyers actively seeking homes in the lower bracket. This discrepancy between seller expectation and market trends can lead to missed opportunities, especially during peak season when demand is high. It underscores the importance of aligning prices strategy with current market dynamics to optimize chances of a successful sale. In the end, the listing can remain on the market for much longer and get stale, maintaining the stigma that leads buyers to believe there is a problem with the property in question. Attracting more eyes to a property doesn't mean that you are getting disqualifying buyers, but instead, a good agent could start the conversation and turn it into a sale that in the end might make sense to both the buyer and the seller. So with this, most of the time, the property ends up with a termination of the sale and a disappointed seller. More importantly, the realtor will lose trust, and although it was not the realtor's fault but the market's, they simply end up with all the blame, and I don't think you would get referral business from this. You see, that is a loss for both the seller and the real estate agent. To me personally, it is lose-lose situation, especially with the current market in Toronto. So here's the second scenario that I would suggest, which is to be trustworthy and brutally honest. While this might be the worst way to interact with the seller because most people think that you would lose business by doing so, if you are a realtor in this this business, I'm going to be brutally honest. Most prospects that are not people that you know, the seller are not going to work with you, but they love to get some feedback or want to get a confirmation of what they believe. But at the end of the day, they are going to use the one realtor that they already had in mind. Does that sound familiar? You can ask any real estate agent and they will tell you that the industry standard from converting a random seller to a client is about 1 to 2%. Think about it. For 1 out of 10 people, a real estate agent ends up working with them. And the reason why is that most real estate agents are afraid to tell the seller the truth and want to please them because they sound pleasing and desperate, which ends up like the first scenario I described earlier. You will still end up not selling the property and damaging the relationship. In fact, I would argue that the modern way to establish relationships is to set expectations up front. Instead of being the traditional salesperson who sounds salesy, be the opposite and don't be afraid of getting your answer early. Here's the problem I see many realtors have, including myself when I first started. We tend to avoid asking the seller to say no so that we can simply add them to our client list and hope one day they can work with you. Shout out to any realtor who were watching this video and comment down below if that is not what you think. But in reality, data states that only 1 to 2% will end up working with you. So this means that the seller saying, "I'll call you later and we will do business in the future," is actually the polite way to tell you that they are not working with you. And also, when you tell them the real expectation of the market price, they simply want to ignore you because you do not agree with what they believe. Here's my rationale for preferring to establish expectation from the beginning. It becomes exceedingly challenging to address them later on when the property has already been on the market for an extended period and the seller has already experienced disappointment. For one, you are differentiating from other ordinary agents that only agree with what the seller says, and knowing that even you can agree with them, like we discussed earlier, the seller has more than 90% of the time not worked with the realtor. And what I think is that nowadays the sellers are more educated in this matter, and I know they could sense it, and that's the reason they turn to some other realtor that they think is more professional or more recognizable. And that perfectly leads to my second point, which is being professional. The number one reason why the seller turned to a professional was because they wanted a trustworthy opinion without some skepticism. This parallels the way you unquestionably follow your doctor's advice when facing a health issue. You place your trust in professionals, whether it's your dentist, coach, trainer, accountant, or others, because you recognize their expertise and reliability. So why are realtors put in a position where sellers don't have full trust in them as professionals? Well, mainly because they think becoming a realtor is quite easy and common, and they don't respect it to the same extent as other professionals. This is the reason they don't trust, especially when the realtor doesn't get their own perspective. In my opinion, this is the chance to show the expertise of what you know about the market to the seller. And don't be afraid to use actual data to formulate the number. I know I will be backfired by many, and that could be harsh to hear from the seller's perspective. However, if you're a seller in today's market and you're watching this video, it's likely because you're eager to gain deeper insights into the market and are seeking a realtor who possesses extensive market knowledge, someone you can confidently place your trust in. This is what I call the professionalism of your industry. And to be honest, this is what a realtor should be selling: their knowledge of the market and their readiness to provide guidance. I often encounter situations where sellers claim to be expert in the real estate market, diligently monitoring and studying it daily, sometimes feeling more knowledgeable than the real estate agent. While this is certainly possible, particularly for those deeply involved in multiple property investments, it's essential to recognize that as a non-real estate agent, your primary source of information are platforms like Zillow, realtor.ca, or House Sigma. While these platforms offer valuable resources to the public, they do not provide the same real-time access as a full-time realtor who can tap directly into the Toronto Real Estate Board. Most of the platforms I mentioned earlier don't update as fast, and the most crucial part is that those platforms will also not display the remarks from all brokerages. The broker remarks are basically the communication between the realtors, and it is critical to look at for important messages such as if the unit is vacant or tenanted, the motivation of the sellers, the offer date information, and so on. This is simply not available on any public platform. On top of that, those platforms are not nearly as powerful as those we use with the realtors. There is a reason the realtor pay a few $100s a month for the access. And let's be honest, if you are not a full-time real estate agent, will you sit down and study the market as frequently as someone who does this daily? In fact, you can find a realtor who is obsessive about the daily activities in the market. I bet they can provide you with information that you can extract from likes of House Sigma or Zillow or realtor.ca for that matter. Ultimately, if you are a seller in today's market, who would you prefer to trust and respect as a professional? The realtor who is open to the possibility of not working together or unafraid of that outcome, or the agent who is solely focused on closing the deal and persuading you to do business regardless of your preference? The question of trust becomes clear. This is from the real estate agent's perspective. If you are watching, what is the risk when you realize that there's only a 1 to 2% likelihood of actually working with the seller, even if you manage to persuade them to align with their desires without complete honesty? For me, I prefer to work with clients who genuinely require my expertise and where I can truly add value to their selling experience. I trust the sellers are seeking a realtor who embodies professionalism and can provide the guidance and market analysis they may have overlooked. It is both beneficial and allows the seller to finally have a correct expectation of the market, because at the end of the day, the buyers are the ones who decide to purchase according to what they expect in the market. And that is not going to be exactly what sellers want, especially in this market. In all honesty, property that is priced right will always sell, even in this market. But the problem is whether the seller can accept the price. I understand that sellers who bought in recent years could face problems since they bought it at a high price. But there are those who made their purchases years ago and struggle to accept not making a larger profit despite having already seen significant gains. It's all part of managing expectations in the real estate landscape. I hope you can find some value in this video and in my full honesty and transparency. If you like it, don't forget to hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos just like this. I have a feeling that many will probably not agree with what I have to say here, but hey, maybe I could learn a thing or two from you if you have other opinions. Make sure you leave your comment below, and I hope to catch you in the next one.